300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. Good morning and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malcolm with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Happy holidays. Thank you so much for joining me on a jam-packed Monday morning. A lot to discuss in sports. There were so many games that were taking place on Christmas and throughout the entire weekend. And not only from the NBA, but from the NFL as well. And that's where we have to start. The first Christmas Day football game in the NFL came at Lambeau Field. The Green Bay Packers and the Cleveland Browns. The Packers ended up surviving the Cleveland Browns 24-22. They squeaked by on Christmas by 2 points. So here's the thing about football, and this is why it perfectly encapsulates this team and this game. Football's a brutal sport, right? Every team's battling through injuries. Every player is battling through nicks and knacks. No one is healthy at this time of the year. It's just impossible because of the stress of the season, how much of just a kind of a trough it can be at times. And every team is having to endure different things. Every team's got stuff going on. Are we impressed? Do we commend players that gut it out when they're injured? Sure. Of course we do. But that's part of the reason why they get paid millions of dollars, is because we expect them to play through injuries. If they were getting paid the minimum wage, well, then we wouldn't have these high expectations, right? In theory, that's the idea. So Baker Mayfield, we know that he's injured. He's not just hurt, he's injured. He's wearing a harness around his shoulder. He can't torque his body to the left. He's battling through. But he threw 4 picks on Saturday against the Packers. Now, the only one I'll defend for him is the last pick that he threw should have been defensive pass interference, defensive PI. Outside of that, the first 2, if not the first 3, were all self-induced. And the problem is, I understand that he's injured and understand that he's trying to gut this out for his team. But you just simply can't afford to make those types of erroneous plays at this stage in the season when the games are of such importance. Games of this magnitude, this is a guy who's been around for a couple years. And again, I understand that he's injured, not just hurt, he's injured. But those are the types of mental mistakes that you make when you're a rookie, when you're a second-year player, not when you're in your 4th year or even 5th year in the league. And the problem is that 21 of the 24 points that the Green Bay Packers scored on Saturday came directly after the first 3 interceptions thrown by Baker Mayfield. So you're gifting them 21 points. Now, granted, only 2 of the 3 picks were in the Green Bay half of the field, so you left yourself points on the board. But here's the thing. The Browns honestly looked like the better team against the Green Bay Packers. If you're watching that game, you're saying to yourself, wow, the Browns defense is playing exceptionally well. And the thing about the Browns is they have a recipe that's conducive for success. It's running the football. They are a run-first team. And that first drive of the game was arguably the most successful drive that they've had all season. It was the best-looking drive that they've had all season. You had Nick Chubb involved in 3 of the first 5 plays of the first drive, including a 40-yard little drop-down pass to him, a short check from Mayfield to him. And Nick Chubb was unstoppable on Saturday. 17 carries, 126 yards. He was averaging 7.4 yards per carry. Then he had 3 catches for 58 yards. So he was averaging 9. Well, I don't know the averages per reception. I guess I would say about 19 to 20, about 19 and a half yards per touch when it came to catches. But then he had 9.2 average yards per touch. So whether he's running the ball or catching the ball, he's averaging almost a first down per touch. That's your answer. That's your recipe for success right there. And what was surprising to me was despite having all that success with the run game, they deviated from it so early. They just kind of turned a cold shoulder and just opted to not run the football until late in the game when, for whatever reason, it clicked in their head, oh, you know what, let's start handing it back off to him. That part was perplexing to me. Because of the early success that they had, despite that strong efficacy rate, they just decided to pivot from that game plan. And unfortunately, that's what contributed to the Packers being able to then kind of step on the gas a bit and pull away midway through the first quarter and even into the second half. Was Browns turned away, or they refused to run the football enough. Packers defense created turnovers. And they understand who they are. Browns didn't, unfortunately, until late in the game. Not to mention, it was ominous from the start when you have a first-year rookie kicker, Chris Snagger, miss an extra point on the first drive of the game. So already, it was an inauspicious start for the Browns because they were constantly behind the 8 ball. They were constantly fighting this uphill battle on the road, which is what forced them to have to go for 2 early on in the game, which is ultimately what led to them losing by 2 points because they couldn't kick a field goal or just score a touchdown and score an extra point to tie it up. They were constantly having to earn back points that they lost off a little chip shot early in the game. And so the problem is, by the time, again, the Browns turned to the run game late in the game, like they did to start the game, and it did buffer their position, and it did set them up for a potential game-winning drive and a game-winning field goal opportunity, everything was too late. Everything was too late, and then obviously I defended Baker on that last interception. That should have been defensive PI, but again, that shouldn't be the position that you're in. If they take care of the football earlier in the game and they trust the run from start to finish, they come out of Lambeau victorious. And that's the problem. So it's a shame because the Browns honestly had a great game plan and they could have gone back to Cleveland a happy camper on the holidays, but instead it goes to the Packers. And you have to credit the Green Bay Packers because at the end of the day, they're doing what good teams do, which is simply finding ways to win. They're finding ways to win. It's not always pretty. It's ugly in this instance, but they're coming away victorious, and their defense is stepping up. Big time, Rashawn Gary, 2 sacks. They had 5 sacks as a team. Rasul Douglas has been one of the best midseason acquisitions for the Packers. In 10 games played for the Green Bay Packers, Rasul Douglas has 5 picks, 2 touchdowns, and a forced fumble in 10 games played. So he's had a tremendous impact. But again, just a gutsy win by the Packers. And obviously the connection with or between Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams is second to none. Again, they're on a separate wavelength. But it's impressive what they were able to do, despite the fact that, honestly, the Browns looked like the better team. They had the better game plan. They just didn't trust the run enough. And the Packers kind of pilfered a win from them on Christmas. So that leads into the second Christmas game between the Indianapolis Colts and the Arizona Cardinals. So the Indianapolis Colts continue their hot streak. They beat the Cardinals on the road, 22-16. Cardinals, of course, have been reeling right now. But one of the most difficult things for people to grasp and come to terms with is their identity. Embracing one's identity is so difficult for people to accept because no one wants to be pigeonholed. No one wants to feel like they've been figured out. So people show this defiance and they want to show this new wrinkle to demonstrate that they can do something different, that they possess a multitude of skill sets. We see this with actors and actresses all the time. You see actors who are more associated with comedies who say, hey, you know what? I don't want to be viewed by directors and producers as simply being the funny guy. I don't want to be, if I'm Matthew McConaughey, I don't want to be in rom-coms anymore. I like The Wedding Planner, but I want to win an Oscar and go perform in Dallas Buyers Club. So he did that. We see that with Steve Carell and John Krasinski, from The Office to The Big Short, from The Office to Captain Jack Ryan, or that whole series with John Krasinski, right? They don't want to be pigeonholed as just comedy actors. But there are plenty of actors that have had that success in that transition, but most actors are successful because they understand who they are, because they embrace what roles they excel in. You have commercial actors, you have television show actors, you've got movie actors, and they stick with that role. They don't deviate to try and prove to critics, I can excel in a foreign role. And that's the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are unabashedly and unshamefully open about who they are, and they are a run-first team. Unlike the Cleveland Browns, who haven't fully bought in, the Colts have bought in and understand we go as far as Jonathan Taylor is going to take us. We go as far as our run game is going to take us. That's where our success lies. And that concept is so hard for NFL teams to buy fully into because we just don't see it. Because there's always different defensive coordinators that are game planning a certain way, that are forcing opponents to have to try and circumvent the way that they normally play to prove to opposing defensive coordinators, we can beat you this way now. You didn't see this coming. The Colts don't do that. They say, yeah, you can game plan for Jonathan Taylor. You can game plan for our run game. The bottom line is, we're going to win the war in the trenches. We're going to win this war of attrition, and we're going to come home victorious. If you can stop us, great. If you can't, sucks for you. That's the thing. Jonathan Taylor, 27 carries, 108 yards on the ground. The Colts are 9-0 this year when Jonathan Taylor rushes for over 100 yards. That's their season in a nutshell. He's the leading rusher in the NFL. That's been their success. They don't shy away from it. That is where they excel. And then from there, you have the confluence of defense and the coaching and a couple key throws per game from Carson Wentz, because I've repeated this one consistent theme when I've talked about the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, if you've been watching the show, which I appreciate, you know how bullish I am about the Indianapolis Colts. I'm not going to rehash all the reasons why, but I've always been bullish about the Indianapolis Colts. But I've said one consistent thing for weeks and really for years, and that is that while the Colts are going to go however far Jonathan Taylor's legs can carry them, while that is the case, that is all contingent on Carson Wentz being competent. Doesn't have to be great. He has to be competent. He has to be able to execute a couple key throws per game. That's what they need from him. And they've been getting that recently. They got it from him against the Arizona Cardinals. 18 of 28, over 200 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, but 0 interceptions. And the thing about Carson Wentz is when he's at his best, where he's at his best is also where he has been in the past at his most reckless, which is scrambling out of the pocket, improvising, going off script. That's where he's been at his best, but that's also where he makes the most mistakes. But yesterday or on Saturday against the Indianapolis Colts, he made a couple key throws to win that game. Huge pickup pass to T.Y. Hilton down the sideline. And then to scramble away from pressure on the move, falling to your left to throw it in the back of the end zone to Desmond Patton for the touchdown. That was a vintage Carson Wentz type of play, and those are the types of throws occasionally that he's going to have to make for this team to thrive in the postseason, which they're capable of doing, which they're more than capable of doing. So this year, he's been a lot less turnover prone, especially in those situations. Obviously, as a whole, he hasn't committed nearly as many interceptions and turnovers, but especially in those off-script, on-the-move type of plays. And the reality is the Colts just keep answering the test. They've won 3 straight games. They've won 6 out of their last 7. They've won 8 of their last 10. And a big reason why is because they have fully embraced what their identity is. They understand that we're a run-first team, and our offense is predicated on our ability to ground and pound. That's the idea. Because half of their losses were the first 3 weeks of the season. This was a team that was still trying to find its way. Their chemistry hadn't developed yet. The symmetry, the harmony between all the guys, it wasn't nearly where it needed to be during that losing stretch. But again, that was during the first 3 weeks of the season. Since then, this team has been on fire. They've been playing extremely confidently, and they've been answering the calls. And not to mention, they did it without their top 4 offensive linemen playing in that game. Quentin Nelson wasn't playing. And they lost their left tackle, Eric Fisher, midway through the game. They lost their starting tight end, Jack Doyle, midway through the game. And yet they still found a way to win. Now, on the flip side for the Arizona Cardinals, this team is starting to unravel a bit. They've been reeling, especially since they lost DeAndre Hopkins. And listen, their defense is actually still really good. I thought that they've done a really good job, even without J.J. Watt. They had 10 tackles for loss against the Colts, a couple sacks. Budda Baker is still one of the best safeties in the NFL. The defense has been doing their part to contain the Colts to 15 points through the first 3.5 quarters. I mean, that's impressive. That's impressive. And the defense has been holding up their end of the bargain. It's been the offense that's sputtered. That's been sputtering right now. Again, no DeAndre Hopkins, no James Conner yesterday. He's kind of their physical back who picks up those tough yards for them, especially in the red zone. But the main thing is Kyler Murray, just especially without those targets, hasn't been quite as confident. He hasn't been playing quite as much downhill. And that's kind of been the problem recently. And it'll just be interesting to see the last 2 weeks for the Arizona Cardinals, because again, this is a team that started 7-0 and they've lost 3 in a row. They've lost 5 of their last 8, and they had 11 penalties for like 85 yards and 3 missed field goals by Matt Prater. 2 missed field goals, 1 extra point that he missed. That's 7 points on the board right there. They lost by 6. You do the math. They lost 22-16, and they missed 2 field goals and an extra point. probably sets them up to win 23-22 potentially. So they've just been kind of trending in the wrong direction. They haven't been getting as many breaks later in the year that they did in the beginning of the season. And again, their last 2 games are tough. At the Cowboys next week, who are still fighting for the top record in the NFC, which is possible they could get it if the Packers were to lose again. And versus Seattle Seahawks, listen, the Seattle Seahawks have totally imploded, but there's still pride in that locker room. They want to finish the season on the right note. They wouldn't mind playing spoiler at all, especially against a divisional foe with Russell Wilson. They'll go out and play with all kinds of confidence, guns a-blazing. So that's not a guarantee either. They may falter down the stretch. Right now, they're in the wild card spot. So it'll be interesting to see how they can kind of close out the season in the final 2 games for them. So, final NFL topic, Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs absolutely just blew out the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday, 36-10. They won their 6th straight AFC West title, which had never been done before, winning 6. Never been done before in that division. In fact, this is the first time during this recent winning streak for the Chiefs that they've won back-to-back AFC West titles. That had never been done before for the Kansas City Chiefs. All kinds of history they're shattering, or records they're shattering, and history they're creating and trailblazing every single year with this team. And there's an axiom in the NFL, which is that, especially in the NFL, but really this can be applied to almost any single sport, is that teams are never defined by the first 2 months of the season, by September and October. You can never fully characterize or encapsulate a team based off the 2 first months of the year. It certainly is important to play well in the first 2 months of the season, and it can set the tone for how your season will start out, but you're never defined by the first 2 months. That's never when you're in the heart of division and conference play. The magnitude of the games aren't quite as important during the first couple months of the year. They're early benchmarks. They're early measuring sticks, but that doesn't define a team. It's just the first half of the season. When you marinate a protein, it takes time for the flavors to coalesce and to amalgamate. You never marinate a protein the day of you want to cook it. You marinate it the night before to get the fully enriched flavor. That's something that chefs will tell you all the time. You never do that. So similarly, it's about how you perform in the second half of the year, in November, in December, when the magnitude of the moment is heightened, when the significance is elevated, when the eyeballs are augmented onto your team. There are more eyeballs watching you play, more nationally televised games, greater importance. These are the things that come into play. These are the factors in the second half of the season. And here's the interesting thing about the Kansas City Chiefs. They have won 22 consecutive games in the months of November and December. Think about that. At the most critical junctures of the season, most critical times of the year, the Kansas City Chiefs have won 22 consecutive games in the months of November and December. Is it always pretty? No. And I was just talking about how with the Green Bay Packers, it's not always pretty. But similarly to them, they find ways to win. It's simple as that. When they have to play at their best, they do. When they have to start rounding into form, before the postseason, they do. And for this team to look up, and they started the year 3-4 through October. They've won 8 straight games now, and they've got the best record in the AFC again at 11-4 again. And you just have to marvel at what they've been able to achieve so far through this stretch of about 3 years right now. Again, we all kind of wrote this team, or most people wrote this team off. I was still holding on for dear life that they could make the playoffs, but there are some serious doubts, serious questions about whether or not this team could even reach the postseason, let alone have the top record in the AFC conference. And to be honest, I wasn't even going to talk about the Chiefs. I didn't plan to talk about the Chiefs today. No Travis Kelce. He didn't have his security blanket was Mahomes. I wasn't planning about talking about this game because I wasn't sure how much I'd be able to glean from it. And then you look up and they just smash mouth the Steelers in the first half. They led 23-0 at the half. And Mahomes, you could see the growth. You can see the maturity in Mahomes. He wasn't forcing things down the field. He was taking what the defense was giving him. He was checking it down to about 9 or 10 different receivers. So he was trusting his guys. They were trusting the run game. I mean, obviously, Byron Pringle had a field day, two passing touchdowns that he collected. And you had Derek Gore and Clyde Edwards-Helaire running with confidence. And hopefully Clyde Edwards-Helaire can recover in time for the postseason. He kind of banged up his shoulder. But again, Mahomes threw to about 9 or 10 different guys. And if someone was going to tell you, if you're an NFL fan, the Kansas City Chiefs, without Travis Kelce and with Tyreek Hill only having 2 catches for 19 yards, both in the first quarter, are going to blow out the Pittsburgh Steelers 36-10, you'd be laughing. You would have expected the score to be much closer. And yet, that was the reality. And the reason why this change in large part has happened is because of the Chiefs' defense. The Chiefs' defense has been resolute and has been growing in confidence every single week. This is a Chiefs defense that surprisingly, and again, I don't really care that the Pittsburgh Steelers offense isn't that explosive. I don't really care. You beat a team or you're up on a team 23-0 at the half. That's noteworthy. That is absolutely noteworthy. They've been the best first quarter team in the NFL over the last 7 weeks. They haven't given up a single point in 7 straight first quarters. They haven't given up a single point in 7 straight first quarters. They haven't allowed a team to score over 10 points in their last 4 home games. They haven't allowed a team to score over 10 points in its last 4 home games. And in 5 straight games, they haven't allowed a touchdown in the first half. That trade for Melvin, wow, can't even talk. Melvin Ingram has been a life preserver. He's been a game changer. He's been that big playmaker, that big pass rusher, edge rusher that they've needed. He's been a godsend for them because he's changed the way that they're able to play. Frank Clark, these guys are now starting to get some pressure up front. And it's shaking out like this team may have to, or where the AFC may have to go through Arrowhead again. And the way that this team plays at home, the way that, more importantly, this defense plays at home versus the way that they play on the road could be the difference. Could absolutely be the difference. Now, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, let me just say this. Because, to be honest, they still have a shot at making the playoffs. That's how wide open the AFC is. It's the wild, wild west in the AFC. So they still have a great shot of making the postseason. But they've been unraveling as well. But it's not unraveling in terms of, their offense is just falling off. and all the wheels are breaking down on this car. No, their character has been unraveling. Their discipline, their focus, that's what's been unraveling. Because the past several weeks, especially on offense, there have been just so many boneheaded, egotistical, just lack of focus, lack of discipline types of penalties that they've accrued that are having a deleterious effect on the outcomes of games. We saw Chase Claypool a couple weeks ago against the Minnesota Vikings. He was celebrating a first down catch, and he wasted away precious seconds that the Steelers would have loved to have had back to potentially tie the game. And then we saw McLeod yesterday, even though the Steelers were already down by 30 at that point. He makes a first down reception, and he's starting to taunt the Chiefs sideline. So it was a big completion of about 15 yards, and now you give it right back because of unsportsmanlike conduct. And it's just boneheaded discipline types of penalties that they continue to be whistled for and penalized for. And that's just so unbecoming of a Mike Tomlin-led team. It's surprising that that's the type of culture that he's fostered at this point, that he's allowed. And that's where the Pittsburgh Steelers have been unraveling to me. It's not simply that, okay, they scored 10 points, they've got no run game. That's the reality, whatever. But it's from a character discipline standpoint. When you think about the Pittsburgh Steelers, you think about the days of the Steel Curtain and Terry Bradshaw, and even in the first couple successful runs with Big Ben, discipline was never in question with the Steelers. That just wasn't the case. And now we're seeing it. Obviously, the NFL has been cracking down on taunting. Just as a collective team, they demonstrated a lack of heart. I mean, outside of Najee Harris, who that guy is a tremendous talent. I feel badly. He's a workhorse, but you're not seeing the positives yet with him because he's having to avoid. It's almost like Saquon Barkley in his first couple years with the Giants, and even now you could still argue, where he's having to evade 2 or 3 defenders just to get back to the original line of scrimmage. He's trying to create for his team. Just not much going on. Outside of Najee Harris, Big Ben, who's competing. He doesn't have much juice left in the tank. He's competing. And TJ Watt, who's battling through cracked ribs. There's just no heart. Everyone else simply left it at the door. Maybe, and I'll throw in Cameron Hayward in there as well. Outside of that, I mean, they just simply have been outperformed like everywhere they go. And it's just surprising. The rest of the team just packed it in. They really just packed it in. And again, the Chiefs, as I mentioned, positioning themselves best record in the AFC. Now, they've won 8 straight games, but their final 2 games of the year are going to be tough. They go at the Bengals and at the Broncos to close out the final 2 games of the year. They do have a 1-game advantage over the Tennessee Titans, who are at 10-5. But if they lose another game, if there's another slippage by the Chiefs, then they'll lose that home field advantage. But so it's 2 difficult road games to close out the year. But man, what a final statement in their regular season home finale. Talk about a way to close out the year at home, especially at Arrowhead. That was an impressive performance by the Kansas City Chiefs. So, want to transition to the NBA. Talk about some NBA basketball that took place on Christmas. The Brooklyn Nets and the Lakers. This was the primetime, highly anticipated marquee matchup of Christmas, of coming into this season, really. You had ABC's number 1 crew, number 1 team on the call. All the eyeballs were on this nationally televised game. And the reason why was because, and the reason why it was so highly anticipated was because of the stardom and the star power that we were expecting to get. The Nets' big three, KD, Kyrie, James Harden, and the Lakers' big three, LeBron, AD, and Westbrook. Now, what ended up happening because of an injury sustained Anthony Davis and because of COVID-19 health and safety protocols precluding Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving from participating, it was just three superstars: James Harden, LeBron James, and Russell Westbrook. But in reality, it was really only two superstars: James Harden and LeBron James. That was the reality here. And so the Lakers trailed by as many as 23 points in this game. To their credit, they erased that deficit in the fourth quarter. It was a 23-point deficit in the fourth quarter. They erased it. They came all the way back, tied it up at 115 with a little under 50 seconds remaining. And then the Nets pulled away. And they ended up winning by 7. So Lakers have lost their 5th straight game. And who they lost to on Saturday was James Harden and Patty Mills. That's who they lost to on Saturday. James Harden and Patty Mills. Now James Harden, to his credit, finally looked like a superstar again. James Harden probably had one of his 3 best outings that he's had as a Brooklyn Net this year, if not the best outing that he's had this year. 36 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists. He looked like the old James Harden that we were accustomed to seeing. Patty Mills dropped 34 points, 8 for 13 from the three-point line. James Harden and Patty Mills combined to score 70 points against the Lakers. Now, 36 from James Harden, you're saying, well, it's James Harden. Makes sense. 34 from Patty Mills. 34 to a guy from Australia who's about 6 feet, 6'1", who torched the Americans in the Olympics, and now he's torching the Lakers with the Nets, the team that he picked over the Lakers. And it's frustrating because I'm seeing LeBron do everything that he can. That's what's just tantalizing for me. It's just tormenting me, is because you have a guy in LeBron who puts out 39 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 40 minutes. He's doing everything he can. He's proving that he's not washed in year 19, that he's still a top 5 player, if not a top 3 player in the NBA, even in year 19. He is still incredible. He is still sensational. There should be no doubt as to his individual talents. What's frustrating and just difficult to swallow right now is the fact that he individually is elite, but he can't carry a team anymore because his elite play no longer elevates the play of the entire team. And he got help from 2 guys, Carmelo Anthony and Malik Monk. Those were the 2 guys that actually came to play on Christmas. Carmelo Anthony had 17. Malik Monk had 20. Both of them were just as vital and instrumental in the Lakers coming back in the fourth quarter. THT was okay. I guess I'll give him a little bit of credit. He had 14 points. But the problem is, and it pains me to say this. I talked about how it almost feels like a tapeworm just eviscerating my insides. I hate to disparage Russell Westbrook because I love the guy to death. Again, I have his jersey right behind me. UCLA kid, an LA kid, Hall of Famer. He just hasn't been good for the Lakers. And on Saturday is a perfect example. He has that triple-double, but he has 13 points, 12 rebounds, 11 assists. That's all good, but he's 4 for 20 from the floor. He had the worst plus-minus on the floor. And the problem is there have been too many instances, too many games where he's had this lack of production. Now, the only silver lining, the only saving grace is that Westbrook is the one superstar that's been healthy. He's available for every single game. He's played in every single game. But the problem is his efficiency and production when he's been available, those have been those haven't been there. That's the problem. And the whole purpose of the Lakers trading for him, of course, was for him to be healthy. But when he's healthy, when he's available, can he be productive and efficient? And the answer is he hasn't. He just hasn't been able to do it. And it's not translating to wins right now. And that's the problem. And clarity is such a rare thing. It's such a unique thing because sometimes it truly takes what feels like rock bottom for that elucidation and that realization to come to the forefront of your brain. And that's the case in this instance for me, because the reality is the Lakers aren't going to win the championship this year. And I understand that Anthony Davis was injured, but the problem with the Lakers is they haven't been able to realize their talents. Hasn't been able to manifest. It hasn't been able to materialize just yet. And we keep talking about hypothetically and in future tense terms. Oh, when this team gets healthy, or if this team actually realizes their full potential, then they can compete. Yeah, we've been saying that for years. We've been seeing that the last 2 years. We've said that. And I do believe that they have the talent to compete for an NBA title, just like I felt like they would have won the NBA title last year if they were healthy. But the problem is, that's been the reality. They haven't been healthy. The players haven't been able to gel together yet. Westbrook hasn't fit with the team just yet. And that's the shame. That's the tough reality for me. I mean, because you lose. It's one thing to lose to the Brooklyn Nets. That's okay. They're the best team in the East. But you lose to James Harden, Patty Mills, Bruce Brown, DeAndre Bembry, James Johnson, Javon Carter, Langston Galloway in 11 minutes from a washed-up Blake Griffin. There's no KD, no Kyrie, no Joe Harris. No KD, no Kyrie, and no Joe Harris. And Nick Claxton, sorry, and he played as well. And he's nice. He's a nice center, but it's just a shame. It's just a shame. Okay. Final topic. My Malkins moments. I have some great Malkins moments for you. So many Malkins moments across sports. Start in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers passed Brett Favre for the most touchdown passes in Green Bay Packers history. Brett Favre held the record with 442 for the longest time. And Aaron Rodgers now has 445 after the 24-22 win over the Cleveland Browns. But he threw the 443rd touchdown pass to Allen Lazard. He connected in the first quarter on his first actually offensive drive. And, of course, it was only fitting that it happened at Lambeau Field on a day that Rodgers ended up throwing 3 passing touchdowns on the game, no interceptions, led the Packers to a 12-3 record, the best record in the NFL right now. And what was special was Brett Favre left a video message for Aaron Rodgers, a congratulatory message, which also had him saying, hey, the next thing you got to do is bring a Lombardi, bring a Super Bowl back to Green Bay, which was the message. But this is what's impressive when you look at Aaron Rodgers and his ability to attain this achievement, juxtapose Brett Favre. So Aaron Rodgers set this record in his 211th overall NFL game played, 204th game started. Brett Favre needed 255 games to achieve this with 253 starts for his 442nd touchdown pass. Now, obviously, times are different. Offenses are prioritized a lot more now than they were back then. But this is the key difference between these two guys. Brett Favre threw 286 interceptions during that span, which went across 16 seasons. Rodgers has thrown just 93 interceptions over his career. So he's achieved the same touchdown success as Brett Favre, with 3 times the fewer interceptions thrown. And that's something that's noteworthy. Obviously, Bart Starr was the first to set the record in Packers history with 152 passing touchdowns. But again, that era, they weren't throwing the ball that much. And it was just serendipitous that at the time that Brett Favre threw the most NFL passing touchdowns in the entire league, that was in 2007. He threw his 421st passing touchdown in 2007. 2007 was also the first time that Aaron Rodgers threw his first ever touchdown pass. That was when he backed up Brett Favre. He filled in one game. He ended up being the full-time starter in 2008. So major shout out to Aaron Rodgers, major achievement on that front. And sticking with the Packers, Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams became the kind of best quarterback wide receiver duo in Packers history. They have the most quarterback to wide receiver touchdowns in Green Bay Packer history. They set the record with 66. Now they have 67 and counting. They broke a previous mark that was held by Aaron Rodgers, and Jordy Nelson was the last recipient. And staying with the NFL, the Minnesota Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson, in his second year in the league, he passed Odell Beckham Jr. for the most receiving yards ever in the first 2 seasons of his NFL career. Obviously, both of these two guys are LSU Tigers, which is also pretty kind of coincidental. But you have Odell Beckham Jr., who had set the record with 2,755 receiving yards, which was a mark that he set in 2015 with the New York Giants. Now Justin Jefferson with the Vikings has 2,851 receiving yards and counting. He's obviously having a fantastic season, over 1,400 passing yards. I think he's top 2, if not top 3 in the NFL for most passing yards on the season, or passing receiving yards, rather, on the season. He's been having a fantastic year. Speaking of guys having a fantastic year, Joe Burrow also makes Malkin's moments. He set a Cincinnati Bengals record for throwing 525 passing yards in the win over the Baltimore Ravens yesterday. They ended up blowing out the Ravens 41-21. I don't really care that Lamar Jackson wasn't playing in this game. They swept the season series versus the Ravens. And here's the interesting thing. Joe Burrow is the first quarterback in NFL history to throw for over 400 yards against the same opponent in the same season. This is the second time that he's torched the Ravens. He threw for over 400 yards. It's the first time specifically that a player has thrown 400-plus yards against the same team in the same season. He threw 417 yards in week 1, and he threw against the Ravens in a win. And then he threw 525 yesterday in week 16. He's the second. Well, first of all, it set a franchise record, this mark, in Bengals history, franchise history, surpassing Boomer Esiason's mark of 290 yards set in an overtime win against the Rams in 1990. In fact, 525 yards in a game for Joe Burrow is the 4th highest mark ever in NFL history. Norm Van Brocklin set the NFL record with 554 passing yards against the Giants in 1951. And Burrow is just having a great year. He's got over 4,100 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. The Bengals are 9-6. They're at the top of the AFC North right now, third seed overall in the AFC. We'll see how the rest of the playoffs shakes out for them, but that's a major, major achievement. And final two Malkin's moments, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won the NFC South Division for the first time since 2007. They beat the Carolina Panthers 32-6, and the win gives them back-to-back 11-win seasons for the first time in franchise history. And again, this is a team that's been depleted. They've been ravaged by injuries. They've been without Jason Pierre-Paul for the majority of the season. No Antoine Winfield Jr. right now. No Levante David with a sprained foot. Chris Godwin gone with a torn ACL. Mike Evans with a hamstring injury. No Leonard Fournette with a hamstring injury. No Giovanni Bernard, who's on IR, I believe. And yet they're still able to do this. And now Shaq Barrett even got injured. So this team is really thin right now, and they're still managing to win. That's impressive. And final Malkin's moment, LeBron James, shout out to him. He passed the late, great Kobe Bryant to become the all-time leader in Christmas points scored with 422 points. Kobe had the record with 395. He also passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the most points as well. The Lakers lost to the Nets 122 to 115. But LeBron did his part. 39 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists. He's played on Christmas for the 15th straight year. The guy's just always featured every time. And he passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the most points scored on a single date in NBA history. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar had 413 points all time on December 26th. And that was surpassed by LeBron James, who finished Christmas Day on the 25th with 422 points on a single date. Not to mention, it was the 13th time in his career that he has scored 20 or more points on a contest on a holiday. Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant, and Oscar Robertson are tied for second with 10 such games. That'll do it for us. Thank you so much for joining me on Morning Joe every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube page, Morning Joe with Jonah Malkin. Follow me on Twitter at Jonah Malkin or at morning_Joe_. Instagram, JMalk97, TikTok, Jonah Malkin. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.